Alright, in today's video we asked what parts of the other two new Total War games, namely Three Kingdoms and Troy, have parts that could fit in a way that feels natural for Total Warhammer. So get comfy, kick back with a nice big old glass of milk, and let's hop right into it.
Wow.
So a couple things before we truly start. First and foremost, the mechanics being stolen need to make sense in a Total Warhammer setting. So, like, sure, the marriage stuff is fine in Three Kingdoms, but makes next to no sense in Total Warhammer, for example. Two, we're also not going to be looking at, like, radical reworks here, only things that could apply to everyone, or at least large groups of factions without requiring a complete and total rewrite of the game. Okie dokie, with that sorted, let's get started with changes plucked from Three Kingdoms first. We'll start our list with an idea I already saw suggested in the forums from before, fast travel. In Three Kingdoms, unit recruitment's pretty dramatically different than the way it is in other Total War games, where units are kept in 6-unit chunks called retinues, which means if you want to disband your lord's army and re-recruit him elsewhere on the map, you can spawn your retinue right over with him in his new location. Now, the entirety of the retinue system is a completely inappropriate fit for Total Warhammer because it would require a completely ground-up rebuild of almost every single in-game mechanic just to work. But the system's ability to move your lords quickly between territories, I appreciated the poster's interpretation of how to do it on the forums, but I'm going to tweak their idea a little bit. So rather than being able to teleport your units across the map, I would suggest two different building options depending on particular factions. Either dramatic movement bonuses through friendly territory, or an option to teleport to another friendly settlement that has the exact same teleportation structure. So the former, the giant movement bonuses, would be for things like Skaven tunnels, Dark Elf underworld routes, or Dwarven and Chaos Dwarf train systems, allowing you to move extremely far in friendly territories with the structure in question, potentially allowing you to move multiple provinces if you have the movement bonus across multiple territories. While it's not quite teleportation, this would still give you massive flexibility for defense and repositioning, more so than even teleportation would, and we'll touch on that in a second. Because the effect is restricted only to friendly territories with the building chain, you wouldn't be able to use it to like slingshot deep into enemy territory or anything else like that, so balance would be roughly preserved. Heck, the building chain could even just be a bonus to otherwise disappointing building chains, such as the ranger barracks for the dwarfs, for example. Ironically, this would be an extremely easy thing to do given that movement bonuses in friendly territory are already a thing that's in the game, but they're just usually really tiny bonuses like 5 to 10%. All this would be able to be the same kind of system, but just cranked way up. The other option for certain factions would be teleportation. Think along the lines of Wood Elves, Chaos Demons, and Lizardmen. This would effectively link settlements together so you could traverse quite literally the entire map between two friendly linked settlements. Unlike the previous example, this would require a dedicated building chain because it offers a pretty severe advantage, and I would still put restrictions over and above that, such as wiping out all remaining movement after teleporting, requiring resources to use, and no teleporting into a besieged territory. Still, much like the previous example, this could theoretically provide huge defensive options, especially to your more far-flung territories, but would be a little less flexible in how it could be used other than that. Again, this actually wouldn't be tremendously difficult to add in. Teleportation's already in the game as it stands for quest battles. This system would simply use that exact same effect, but with the endpoint being a territory rather than a battle. The next thing to steal is a particular benefit for races like the Dark Elves and the Skavens, but could improve literally every race in the game, and that's the improved loyalty systems in Three Kingdoms. In Three Kingdoms, the system's called Guanxi, I think. I'll be honest, I'm probably butchering that, so I apologize in advance. But it effectively encompasses an entire personality system, with loyalty and traits all bundled together. Basically, each of your heroes has their own personalities, their own likes, dislikes, friendships, rivalries, personal goals, and a whole bunch of other things. To be honest, I would genuinely love to see this game. Imagine if you had an Empire hero who considered ranged weapons to be dishonorable and held a distinct hatred for elves due to a past event that they had. Maybe now you have a second Empire engineer hero in your army who had nothing but admiration for the elves. Well, these two are naturally going to be rivals with one another, and depending on your decision making, you'd run the very real risk of eventually losing one of them, just due to the fact that pleasing one would naturally cause you to, annoy the other one. Which would mean they wouldn't only just leave your army, they would actually run the risk of joining up with the enemies. This would add just a whole other wrinkle to the campaign experience that, to me, I think would be particularly awesome to see, though it would probably require some definite back-end kind of work. It's not quite as plug-and-play as the previous example is. The last thing on the list to steal is the same thing that everyone's been asking for since Three Kingdoms even launched. The improved diplomacy options. These were probably the single greatest additions to Three Kingdoms, and I would be utterly shocked if they weren't already going to be ported to Total Warhammer 3 anyways. I'm not going to dive into everything in it because the core of it's roughly the same as Total Warhammer. The more trustworthy, respected, and powerful you are, the better your odds of getting others to sign your agreements. However, the minutiae of how it works is quite a lot better compared to Total Warhammer, and it tends to feel a lot more natural as a result. Additionally, it has a few more things available to do in diplomacy, but there's two things in particular that I could see porting over to Total Warhammer quite well. First up is territory trading. There's an awesome mod in the workshop that already opens this up, but really, Game 3 should just launch with this by default. There's few things more annoying than nabbing 3 out of 4 territories in a province, only to watch your idiot ally go and snatch up the 4th. The way the unmodded game currently is, your only real option in that situation is to either break the alliance and go to war, or to go, be a really bad ally and try to cause a rebellion in their territory and hope that that rebellion takes out the settlement on your behalf. Or if you get really, really lucky, pretend to be an ally to them during an enemy invasion, and just try to nail as many of their own troops with artillery and spells as you can before bailing on the battle for them. Again though, this is more aggravating than it needs to be because territory trading already solves that frustration innately by just being able to buy out the selected turf, which keeps your honor and allegiance both intact. The other cool addition that they added in for diplomacy was the approved allegiance and vassal mechanics. So in Total Warhammer, a military alliance is often hated by the player base since your allies tend to have the intelligence of a shoe and will often cause more trouble than they actually help with during an alliance. In Three Kingdoms, however, decisions aren't just simply accepted by the entire coalition, but they're voted upon independently. If someone seeks to declare war, their allies can choose to veto that war, meaning the player won't have to deal with your allies being idiots. And in case you're thinking, well then how am I supposed to declare war and do anything? Do remember, you can already declare war in Total Warhammer without involving your allies in any way. If your allies chose not to back you, and you still need to go to war, that's fine, just understand you're going to do it on your own. The vassal mechanic is slightly less extreme of a change, but still improved. But basically, vassalization is no longer an all-or-nothing affair. Vassals can seek independence, they can be elevated by their host to be a full ally, they can be properly annexed by their host, and so on. These little tweaks would make the diplomacy options in the games a lot less frustrating to use and would actually swing the pendulum all the way into being very rewarding to use. So those are all the things I would take from Three Kingdoms, and if you're angrily mashing the caps lock key right now in the comments about the dueling mechanic, I can't see it adding anything useful to the game, and it would require an excessive amount of back-end work just to likely imbalance the game. Mage Lords, for example, could just get absolutely curb-stomped in a one-on-one duel before being able to contribute anything useful to the match itself. If it's added into Total Warhammer 3, I mean, I'm not going to lament its inclusion, though I'd much rather see the resources dedicated to something far more useful to the game at large. Alright, that's Three Kingdoms down, let's move over to Troy. It feels kind of weird plucking mechanics from a game that hasn't even released yet, and frankly these mechanics could be terrible for all that we know, but we do still have some information ahead of time that could be awesome. Now I'll precede the one that by saying I would have loved to have seen the multi-resource economy added into Total Warhammer, but it's just way too late in the series now. Like a change of that scale would require a 100% complete ground-up rework of almost every single thing in the entire game. That said, I hope that the multi-resource system becomes the default for each subsequent Total War game in the future, because it opens up a ton of options for balance and ironically also for asymmetric warfare. So our first thing to steal is something that we actually already had a soft confirmation for Total Warhammer earlier this year: different terrain effects. I'll link to my original coverage of the CA Twitch stream that detailed this in the description, just in case you're curious. However, it's not necessary for you to watch that in order to understand it for this video. Basically, way back then, we were already talking about how to put in different terrain modifiers on the battle maps, and they were effectively just trying to figure out, and basically to ensure that the AI was smart enough to use them, or at the bare minimum, smart enough not to make themselves vulnerable to them. Now, I have faith that they could do that earlier already, given that the AI is already smart enough not to chuck their troops into shallow water if they can help it. But now that we know they can handle, we know for a fact they can handle it, given that Troy is launching with multiple terrain effects, this could open up a whole new slew of magical spells, new battle mechanics, new campaign effects, new rite effects, and even more stuff than that. Like, there's no way this doesn't launch in Total Warhammer 3 in my eyes, but we'll put it on the list for the sake of completeness. The other thing they're changing in the battles are that the infantry are no longer just infantry. There's now light infantry, medium infantry, and heavy infantry. We sorta already have that covered in Total Warhammer though, because we have infantry, monstrous infantry, and just straight up monsters. So I'm not particularly fussed about that, but they also have a lot more distinctions between the different infantry classes in Total Warhammer Troy, it looks like, and I do hope that those same distinctions are more fleshed out for Total Warhammer 3, especially with all those new battlefield mechanics being introduced. Tall grass might screw with the vision and melee stats of skeletons, but Ushabti should be able to see over it, for example, even if the grass does slow down their melee capabilities, while something like a Hyro Titan would be completely and utterly unaffected by grass in any capacity. Again, this isn't so much stealing the concept itself from Troy, but rather the implications of the concept. The last battlefield thing to steal, in my eyes, would be the units having stances. So in Troy, units can be toggled between offensive and defensive stances. An example of this in Troy, for example, would be spearmen forming a phalanx when defensively set up, making them almost immune to missile fire, but far too slow and ponderous to do any real damage in melee. However, in switching them to their offensive stance, they put their shields on their backs, which exposes them to missile fire, but it gives them two hands to wield their spears as effectively as possible. There's a bunch of units that this would be extremely easy to port over into a direct one-to-one, but even just making sure that it's in the game period would give the modders all the tools they would need to add it to their own creations. The final feature that I would steal from Troy is the increased utility of hidden encampments. So in Troy, the Ithacans have hidden encampments similar to pirate coves or Skaven undercities that allows them to do the usual stuff, but more interestingly, it also allows them to recruit units from those hidden encampments. I have always subscribed to the idea that the Skaven shouldn't even have hidden settlements, they should be exclusively focused on undercities. Stealing this from Troy would finally make that a possibility, but this isn't even exclusive to the Skaven, no. Imagine infiltrating the Empire as the Warriors of Chaos and starting cults within their cities to bolster your own forces prior to an invasion. Or picture that after discovering an undercity, rather than just paying a fee to erase it, you'd actually have to go and fight an underground battle against the garrison itself. Like, there's tons of options on the table here if CA is willing to take the mechanics they fleshed out in Troy and port them over to Total Warhammer 3. Are these going to be in at launch? Almost assuredly not, but it's an option now for racial reworks down the line. Now, there was one other feature that I kind of hummed and hawed on, but ultimately I decided I wouldn't like to see it in Total Warhammer, apart from maybe as a special mechanic for a singular lord down the line. Settling a location without an army. While at first blush this might sound awesome, being able to just send off a settler ahead of your main army to occupy ruins and the like, consider how annoying this will be for certain factions. Are you playing as a horde? Well, guess what? Have fun accomplishing literally nothing as the runes refill even faster than they already do behind you. You want to raise an enemy settlement to buy yourself some time in a really protracted fight? No point, it'll be back in no time flat. Playing as the Skaven, have fun as you're uncovered every 3 seconds by a settler. It'll likely be very fun for Troy, but I think that this creates more problems than it solves in Total Warhammer 3. Alright, anyways, that's my best Blood Ravens impression about what to steal for Total Warhammer 3. So what do you think? Am I wrong on some of these points? Is there some other feature from a past game or an upcoming game that you want to see ported over? Let me know down in the comments down below. I really do enjoy chatting with you guys in the comments every week. I'm hoping to get the next batch of Legendary Lord videos out next week, so fingers crossed for that. However, there's not going to be a mod review for this week. CA, of course, just finished pushing out a patch that proceeded to break about 3/4 of mods already on the workshop. But most frustratingly, one of the mods that it broke was Mixu's mod, which unfortunately is like a staple for 90% of my load list. So until that gets updated and fixed, unfortunately I can't really get the mod review pumped out in time. Apologies for that. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.